Hello, what's up? I'm Sohrab, aka SoSaLa. We have a great guest this time from Madrid, right? Volker, you're in Madrid, right?
Currently, I'm in Madrid at a residency.
The podcast seeks to further the mission of the Musicians' Rights Advocacy Organization Musicians for Musicians, MFM, which is a collective of freelance musicians to advocate for fair pay, respect, and equitable treatment for all working musicians. So based on this mission statement, we try to run podcasts which don't only speak about music careers, but also about the business side of making music. So today is episode 54. The last one was with Fela Kuti's legendary guitarist Kaleta. Having Volker as the next guest makes a lot of sense because he will tell us his connections, especially with West Africa, Senegal. Before we start to speak about things in detail, let me quote you first, which describes you perfectly, who he is and what he wants to achieve as a person and professional musician. With each new composition, film, or project, I expand my vocabulary and skill set as an artist. I search for ways to express my vision by stretching musical boundaries, expanding into community art and social art, and creating my own set of rules. I've never been an artist who neatly fits into a box or a clearly defined category of music or film. Looking back, I now realize that simply being an international performing artist, composer, or filmmaker is not satisfying to me. My motivation for everything I do is to give back to the community and touch people through my work in unforeseen ways I cannot predict, as the need for particular work comes to me as a task, challenging me, my ideas, and my knowledge. Actually, this quote by you, Volker, it describes very well who you are, what you have done, and in what direction you're going. I would call you are like a all-round musician. You're active across many artistic platforms, including as a composer, recording and performing artist, filmmaker, educator, and maybe you don't want to use it, but for me, you are also a music activist. Your favorite music styles are, I would say, jazz, West African music. With West African music, it's always a problem with African. Sure, Senegal, I would say Senegal and Mali especially, and contemporary electronic music, sound installations, and multimedia projects. And you're also collaborating with dancers. That's unbelievable, the range of your activities. Be a little nasty, as an ex-German, because I think you're an American now, right? German-American, am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Dual citizenship.
Because I called myself for a while Iranian-American, then Persian-American. And since I'm a citizen, I'm in America, I call myself American to make it clear that I'm in America. I pay my taxes and I want my rights protected by the Constitution. And if I say Iranian American, it's not fair because I'm in America, right? So just let's start simply as a German. Now you're an American. Why did you choose jazz as your primary music style and then fall in love later with griot music and flamenco?
I really fell in love with jazz music quite early on in my early teenage years, and I have to thank my older brother who took me to a concert of Arnold Coleman Primetime Electric Band at the Stadtgarten in Cologne. And he told me, "Oh, you're too young, you don't understand this." And it really hit me, and I started to love jazz early on. And at that time was really a great city to grow up in, because the radio station, the West German radio station, funded a lot of great concerts at the Stadtgarten and in the WDR Big Band. So I got to see some of the greatest people in jazz, who from the old cats like Miles Davis, Joe Henderson, Al Foster, to the progressive downtown scene from Bill Frisell, John Zorn, and Arthur Lindsay. Oh, I saw Sun Ra orchestras multiple times, different orchestras, different locations, different festivals, and really fell in love with Don Cherry. And I'm like in his footsteps, I think, probably on my journey of working with different cultures.
What was so great about that music when you heard it? Why did it touch you? What was it different from German folklore music or chanson or whatever you heard at that time? Why did it touch your heart? What was it?
Jazz really allowed me to explore new worlds and freedom, and it really touched me deeply in my heart. The sound,
The
the
rhythm.
musicians, the artists, the messages. I'm a huge fan of Billie Holiday. I adore artists who really transmit deep music and deep mystical messages, no matter what technical skills they have. If you think about Billie Holiday's a range of 1.5 octave, but she says everything you need to say as a singer. She's not a virtuosic singer, but at the same time, it is virtuosic because it's very magical in that sense. It's on a high virtuosity of magic. Me being a trumpet player, I don't like trumpet players too much, except Miles Davis, Don Cherry. So there's still that aspect in there of my heritage too, or my love for the music, to also try to become limitless on my instrument and to strive for it every day. But it came also in a time where my father got very sick and I lost him when I was 14. And so these concerts to see Miles Davis live, as well as the Japanese Culture Center in Cologne, showed a retrospective of all the Akira Kurosawa movies. So it was Spike Lee movies and Akira Kurosawa and jazz who really filled the void of loss of my father. And it became really a part of a religion at that point for me, and still is today. I could not live or breathe without music and making jazz or improvise. It's part of my genes.
I can sympathize with you because I started to like jazz when I was in Hamburg. There was the America House, the American House, and they invited many jazz musicians, and especially Gene Lee was there, I remember. So free jazz and really avant-garde jazz was featured in that American Center in Hamburg. And I don't know why, but I was really touched by the music, by the energy, by the messages, especially the messages. You used the word freedom. When you're in Hamburg, I'm a little older than you, so freedom was something but when you hear other people demanding freedom or dreaming of being free, it really touches your heart, especially when you're very open to this kind of messages. So I can understand this very well. And also the music you couldn't compare it to other music. It was really boom. And of course, the culture, I could feel a difference of culture too. Being in a white community in Hamburg and seeing, without sounding like a racist, Black people coming and playing music which is so bluesy, so deep, then of course you get touched by it. Okay, so when did you fall in love then later with West African music like Mandé music, griot music, and then later to flamenco?
It's all connected. I had one vinyl of the Manu Dibango Electric Africa album. There's a Herbie Hancock solo on there, Bill Laswell plays bass. So there's always this connection with Africa, with bands. And there was a great bar in Cologne called Tuba, but it was actually an African bar. It was a place where all the different people from all over Africa would hang out. I went there and I was welcomed because I was probably the only 14-year-old or 13-year-old boy walking into the bar and talking to them. And they were really kind to me and explained the music to me. It was really welcoming. It was a great time. And at the same time, also the festivals in Moers had an African dance night. It's our great
festival,
bands.
You mean the Moers, the avant-garde festival?
Back in the 80s, they still had an African dance night. So maybe they do it again. I don't know. But it's really, you got exposed to it automatically. Yeah. And then Youssou N'Dour, I fell in love with his music, always listened to his music. And when I was in conservatory in Cologne, I saw this ad to audition for an African European jazz orchestra in Paris. So I sent in a tape, invited me, and they picked 6 young musicians from different European countries to go to St. Louis, Senegal and play at the jazz festival. So we actually opened for Youssou N'Dour in 2001. And it was amazing. There were like 10,000 people, but people were climbing over the fences to go to see him. He drove with a limo into St. Louis, Senegal. Yeah. And we opened with François Janot was the leader with our African European Jazz Orchestra. Half the band was African, half of it was white from Europe. And it was just beautiful. We had 2 griots who were more storytellers than musicians. So they were singing in front of the band. They would just start in the middle of the solo, end wherever they want. No,
by the way,
even though we rehearsed with...
When you say griot, is it
the storytellers?
Storytellers, they're not singing, right? They're more reciting, right?
They were singing at that point with us and rehearsing 3 weeks with us. And it was really funny because they, even though we rehearsed, but we couldn't really communicate, they would just start and end whenever they feel. And there was two, because the first would say something and the second one would repeat it or confirm that this is really true. And the next day, the article talked all about the griots, but not about our band. It was fun locally. It was really funny because they're a very highly respected storyteller.
Can you describe what a griot is for our audience?
The griot is a cast of musician and storyteller who upkeeps the oral history of West Africa because there was no written language back in the day. So during the independence in the 60s, they started to find a way to write down their own language. So it makes it very unique. And it also makes it closely connected to all our black culture in the United States. It's connected because the majority of the slaves who came to America came from West Africa during that time. So there's a strong connection from gestures, the way of talking. You can find Mandinka, the language, the music. If you take some traditional song, Bulula, bula, bulila, dida, yuba, bida, buda, bulula. And for me, it's like, okay, that's swing phrasing. So it's just... No classical trumpet player will play boo-wop, but it's because of the tonal language, plus stopping the note, the rhythm, the polyrhythms, the cross rhythms, that's all comes from there. Even though the music feels very different, because the jazz has this very deep blues and church music influence, where I think in Africa it's different, yet there's deep roots connected to jazz.
Okay, and I assume that the kora is your favorite instrument, right?
So I remember in 1995, this was even before the African Jazz Orchestra, I went on a tour with the Landesjugend Jazz Orchestra, which was a youth big band orchestra, and we traveled to 6 different countries.
What was the name?
It's Landesjugend Jazz Orchestra NRW, so it's a North Rhine-Westphalia youth orchestra, big band. And we got to travel to 6 different countries. When we were in Dakar at Ile de Gorée, whereas also the house of slaves with the door where the slaves were transported, even though it was a short time actually in the overall perspective, but it means a lot to the people who all came from Africa. On this island, I remember sitting in a restaurant and having lunch, and I heard the Kora for the first time. I already listened to other West African music, but I didn't hear it solo that directly into my face, and I was just hypnotized by it. And it turns out that very often the Cissoko families, the brothers and sisters, because Ablaye Cissoko and Ali Boulo Santo Cissoko, the both Kora players I play with, are brothers, but they have 21 brothers and sisters, and they all regularly play on this island. So I probably heard one of them back in my 20s already.
Okay, now let's go to flamenco. So you fell in love with griot music, Mandé music, Kora music, and then flamenco, right?
Yes.
How come?
I got lucky on this festival when I was a teenager, visiting all the festivals close by in Münster, Meurs, Neuwied. Those were the festival around Cologne. I got to see Paco de Lucia many times. I was fascinated by the music. And then eventually with Ablaye Cissoko, the duo where we did Sierra and Monkey Jonty, when we started touring in Spain, I always went to the show and I always was trying to figure out where's the form, like how do they make this happen? And it took me a while until much later that I realized it's all about more styles and then determine like who sing and letras and falsettas, so like poems and pre-composed little sections which fit into or are in a certain style. And all they do is when they do a tableau, which is a typical dance show with singers and the guitarist now, and often also the Peruvian cajon, they just make an order of styles. We start with this style, we go to this style and this style, and then what the guitarist will play is not predetermined. He can choose to play, quote someone, or play his own composition in that style, and then the singer could enter. You have to follow the singer's harmonies, and you know all the letras, like now in jazz standards. And it's really like a further step as improvising, because really it's like you play in one style, or now this, and then you have all these different sections or different places and different things you can go to, and you follow the dancer. So that took me a while to understand, because as a jazz musician, I was trying to figure out where's the form, how do they meet? I understood like there's breaks and they communicate in theaters, these breaks, but it's had no idea how do they go from beginning to end and how that happens.
So I assume that the jazz music as something you really studied. We talk about education later. Based on jazz, you were able to understand West African and flamenco music in a way that you said, oh, this is something I would like to do?
The connection, of course, to Africa is obvious. The connection to flamenco is a little bit different. It feels a different kind of form. And it's similar to both traditions. It's really something you commit to, this tradition. In West Africa, for the griot musician, you're born, your father's a griot, or mother griot, or both griots. But then now it's different today, but it's basically you were born as a griot musician. With flamenco, it's a real commitment fully to actually learn all this tradition, the music and these different styles, and able to perform and accompany singers and dancers. And then also then become a concert flamenco player where you compose your own music.
But in the past, flamenco was roots music.
It has resistance. So that's interesting as a resistance that they're pushed out of Spain from the church music because everything was rhythmically strong, was evil. So they pushed them, the Moors, the flamenco of the Gypsies and the Jewish out of the south of Spain. That's why flamenco comes from the south of Spain. But I love the fierceness of the music and the liveliness and direct communication and being able to improvise so freely and openly and interact with others is really fascinating to me, as well as the scales.
Well, I think even now, because he's thinking of Sabar dance, it's very close to flamenco in terms of the feet movements, that rhythm, percussion, and feet movements are so in sync.
The funny thing is, in a fete de Sabar, the percussionists get more and more complicated. The griots, that's the actual griot music from specifically Senegal, whereas the Kora music comes more from Senegambia region, but it's the dancers follow the rhythm gets more complicated, and that the dancer loses the rhythm, and when the dancer loses the rhythm, they have to leave the stage. So it's like, and it's also a way of, when school graduation is happening, then the girls are presented to the village, and they dance, and it's a communal event, and it goes on from sometimes 5-6 hours, and the percussion hands, they feel like strong leather back, or really hard leather. So they're used to play for hours and hours, and sometimes blood on the hands. And then I remember waiting for the bus at night at 4 a.m. and there's no bus schedule in Africa, so you just stand in somewhere in a village and waiting for the next bus to come, so to get home to Dakar or St. Louis or wherever. The flamenco dance, the difference is that the dancers are actually also creating rhythms. They're also musicians. So great dancers are like a drummer. So that's the difference too. They're actually part of the musical whole group.
The reason I mentioned you more, the ex-German, is I know how Germans groove, because I was educated and brought up in Germany. So it's like 4/4 or 2 beat. So for you, flamenco and also African music and also Oriental music, where I'm coming from, is 6/8. So I think this 6/8 rhythm for you to feel and play should be a little obstacle, but you could say, okay, I know 3/4, waltz music, right? It's just a little faster. But was this the 6/8 groove in flamenco and in the West Africa, should we say more Senegalese music or Mali music or Mandé music?
I'm more, especially in Mandé music. I had guelguis or the percussionists in some songs. I added them in my project, but I have not studied guel music. I transcribed a few percussion parties for a project where I translated to a string quartet the music of the African harp, but I just used it as a rhythm pattern and then harmonized the patterns and the breaks. But I'm not really a specialist on that music per se, because I didn't take lessons or studied it, or didn't tour with someone extensively, like for 14 years with Ablaye. So Mandé music is more my and specifically the Kora music.
The reason why I tried to get you to the point where we are now is because I think at this time your main project is
my trio with Flamencora currently.
Okay, let's go to your project now. And it seems like you love it. You are really involved in it. You are the leader, even if you don't call you leader. But for me, you are the leader because you are paying your musicians. You book the gigs. You bring the band together. You can be as liberal as you want. You're still the leader for me. Because some musicians don't want to be called leader. In my case, I don't believe in total liberalism. There should be always credit to the person who does the main work. And I want to give credit to your work because I know you also personally. and how much you put into this project. So let's start now about your project. When did it start and who are the members?
It really started during COVID. I was invited to a residency in Salzburg when the numbers of COVID was not so high in 2020. That was July 2020. And the city of Salzburg decided to actually hold a festival for the independent artists because they didn't cancel the Salzburg Festspiele, which is a huge classical festival. And so they felt like the need to provide resources to independent artists as well, to be fair, during COVID. And because I live in both parts of the world, I was able to pretend I'm going home, attending this residency. And since I was always fascinated by flamenco, I discovered Alejandro Moreno, who is on our first album, now considered one of the best flamenco players here in Madrid. And I was trying to do a duo, similar to my Kora duo with trumpet. But during the residency, I realized it's not going to work. The way flamenco players work is just by hearing. So when I wrote like a couple chords out and wrote even something like E over G sharp, it took him 10 minutes to figure this out, which is the most simple chord because he just works by hearing. And he also needed to improvise. For him, he needed actual rhythms. He needed a percussionist or palmas, the hand clapping, in order to improvise. So what he did when we performed together, we did a couple of Paco de Lucia covers songs, and he was basically playing the solo of Paco de Lucia, which is technically quite impressive and also from memory quite astonishing that he could play it on all these different songs. And I basically played my solos, so I learned the melodies and started to realize that it takes a much more dedicated commitment to really understand how to really play flamenco. And also because they have such precision, not all of the flamenco players, but Alejandro has such a detailed precision of timing, which I think top jazz musicians have, but 99% don't. And that's the difference. The top 2 or 5% of jazz musicians who are really on the top are there because of extremely great timing and being able to play afterwards, not before, which a lot of people do. And that realized me, wow, the offbeats.
Oh, I mean with afterwards, before.
We learn in jazz to play with the time as a horn player. We put on the metronome 2/4 and we try to push to play before and afterwards.
Okay.
And I did this even young because I took lessons with John McNeil back in 1996. So I did this for many years. But there's another next level of precision in the today's modern flamenco scene because Paco introduced to play with all this with or record with a click track. So that was he really established the precision on the next level of clarity. When you play with someone who has a very strong timing, you realize that your timing is very bad. Even though I played in salsa bands and studied bata and arranged for Brazilian bands, I was exposed. The biggest challenge or the very humbling aspect of playing flamenco is that you have to tap your feet to each different style a different way, and then also the resolutions happens on different beats and different music. And it's really humbling because you become like a drummer, independence. Your foot taps this, you play different things, and you have melody, so you're playing 3 things at the same time. And if you talk to flamenco players, they're very humble because they're always learning, they're always constantly learning and adding, and it's endless, as any music, really. But I feel really deeply enriched by flamenco. Also the flamenco scales, which come out of the maqam, you have this at the end of the Andalusian cadence, you have these 2 major chords, half a step apart from each other. So A minor, G major, F major, and then E major. So the F and E major is half chromatic apart, ending on the flamenco chord E with an added flat 2, important not a flat 9, because most jazz players play it as a flat 9 or higher up, and it sounds like a dominant. It has to be either lower down, or if you play the 7th in the chord, it has to be down there so it doesn't sound like a dominant. So the main difference between playing the Andalusian cadence is like the tonic is not A minor, the tonic is really E flamenco. The flamenco scales work interlinked over both scales, over the F Lydian chord and over the E flamenco. So in jazz, translated to any tritone substitution, which is a half step apart, you can throw in all the maqam scales and the flamenco scales, and you will arrive at a very different sound, which doesn't come from tritone substitution or from blues or chromatic embellishment, but rather from maqam, which fits over any Lydian chords and over the flamenco chords, even dominance chords. So you have very different sound. And that's for me enriching as a trumpeter. So I'm not trying to be a flamenco player because I can't become a flamenco musician, but I can be informed and include that in my other music or in the music I'm working on right now.
What is maqam? Could you describe it as short as possible?
Okay, it's basically a system of 4-chord system which you can put together in different ways, and it comes from Middle Eastern music. It's a modal music form.
That's important, modal music, Arabic modal music.
Yeah, and it's basically because you can put these tetrachords or sounds together in different ways, you arrive at different chromatic things, which doesn't come from church music or any tertiary music relationship, which makes it very interesting.
Something important, let's start this Kora thing. According to my research, you started to play with Kora in 2007 with the Cissoko family, especially with Ablaye Cissoko, correct?
Yes.
And it's unbelievable. You released 3 CDs, and these 3 CDs are streamed 30 million times.
I met the Ablaye doing the African European Jazz Orchestra. So that was 2002 where I met him. He was part of the instrument, but he didn't sing. And then I got a scholarship to come to New York. And then 2 years, 3 years later, I thought, oh, there was something I wanted to do in Senegal, work with Ablaye. So I went back and produced my first idea, a mix of different concerts. But then a label in New York Oblique Sound was very interesting. Kora was very supportive in the first recording, supported. And then we moved to Motema Music with Jana Hertzen, which is wonderful. And we're very happy with Motema and Jana, and so supportive.
Then you...
At that time, that was like people haven't heard Kora so much, not used so much Kora in the music at that time. So we were really one of the first duos out there, even before Vicente Segal and Baba Cissoko or Abbas, even though we didn't know how it works live, because we recorded this beautiful album with a lot of different tracks. And we were very nervous to see if it works, but eventually we played big festivals, even big stages, and it worked.
And then you had a recording with Mino Sinelu, right?
Yes, that came with a duo with Ali, Boulo and Cissoko.
Yes, sorry.
And during COVID, I also met Mino in Paris by chance, and then he gave me his number, we reconnected, and then we worked together with Ali Boulo Santo and have released a duo album where on some songs Mino is as a guest on featured artists. And really, I have to thank him. He's amazing. I grew up, and We Want Miles also was one of the albums which pulled me into jazz, where he's on. I heard it, Gil Evans' Big Band Orchestra live at Sweet Basil, where Mike Mino is playing on, and of course all the Sting records. So it's like there's only 2 percussionists where I have a deep influence in me, and drummer. It's 3 people I really adore most. It's Alvin Jones, Nana Vasconcelos, and Mino Sinelu. I think that's for me is the ones who influenced me early on in my music career.
Now it's a good time to play our first track. You mentioned Mino Sinelu, and you had a trio thing with your present Kora player, Ali, Boulo, Santo, Cissoko, the track intro from the album Sargal. Okay, let's listen to it.
Man bu ma dugg see si kër ga ngeen may siin seen bëñ yi ni di naan ma toogal ni di naan ma taxawal njëkkate bañ lu mu weex weex deret ko lal man bu ma dugg see si kër ga ngeen may siin seen bëñ yi ni di naan ma toogal ni di naan ma taxawal njëkkate bañ lu mu weex weex tere koko la Badia betiata nyontem Badia betiata nyontem Tama tama Nimembadi alam Tama tama Badia betiata Nyontem Badia betiata Sakaradima Wama kui sagari Ali moi sagari Wama kui sagari Fatu moi sagari Wama kui sagari to Mami moi sagari Wama kui sagari Rama moi sagari Wama kui sagari Buba moi sagari Wama kui sagari to Uli mata moi sagari Wama kuzarito, jadi abi moizarito. Nimembadi alama, tama tama. Nimembadi alama, tama tama. Badia betiata nyontem Badia betiata sakaradima
Oh, nice track, Volker. I really loved it. Can you comment to this track? Why did you choose this track for this?
As usual, there's a couple of business decisions and artistic decisions. So we recorded 3 pieces on the album with Mino, where we also had music videos, which we shot in Senegal. So we chose SoSaLa, and it's a traditional song. And it's nice to play on. And the interesting thing for me is Mino is really, his ears are so open. Every time we do a retake, his response and interaction with the Kora is so beautiful. It's a master musician, and it's just swinging, and it's really interacting beautiful with us and the music. He also understands the music and respect for the griot music and the Kora. And yeah, just a beautiful person, like very supportive.
Special about this track? musically?
This track, the music.
For example, you played with Ablaye before.
Yeah.
What is the difference
It's,
of
it's,
their Kora
it's
playing? This should be in this recording. That
the interesting thing is whenever I play with someone from the Cissoko family, I feel like home because I've worked with Ablaye 14 years and now 6 years with Ali. And an interesting thing is when I play with other Kora families here in New York or somewhere else that play the same tradition, the same music, but every family has a certain different style of playing. So it feels like a little different. So it feels like home when I play with the Cissoko family because they all play the songs in a certain way or certain style and swing. The difference is that one thing which sets Ablaye apart is that he left the family when he was 9. So he developed his own style of music a little bit and worked a lot with Western musicians and jazz musicians who came to town in St. Louis because he left Dakar and was working in a hotel Kumbabang where he played for tourists. And he often spent a lot of time there at the beach and composing and playing his own style, very soft style. The difference with Ali Boulo Santo Cissoko is that he encompasses all the history of the different Kora styles from different regions. He can play different styles. It's incredible of the knowledge he's carrying because he knows all the traditions and all the traditional music. And also, Ali has provided a lot of ideas for different songs, so he's constantly shooting out new songs like naturally. And he was very much more established in France, much more than Ablaye before. Now Ablaye is more known, but it's before we started the duo. Ali was the Kora player in Europe and France, and he played with many great artists, wrote songs for famous artists, worked with big bands, orchestras, and also he plays guitar, keyboard. He knows how to run a studio, compressors, and he plays percussion, he plays sabah on his own record. So it's a very versatile musician and understands harmonies more, almost similar to a Western trained musician. To like
Ablaye react when you had Ali in your.
it's still in the family,
Ablaye,
so it's not.
Did you see nothing?
No,
I
no.
know.
It's just like we just at the same time. I was living in Paris at this point. It was just easier to start a new project. This really happened during COVID because we were invited to play for the German president during COVID, which didn't happen because the numbers went up. But basically, the idea was to work with Cissoko, which Ali Boulo Santo already played with, because he lives in Hamburg. And during COVID, you don't have to cross borders. You could just come from Hamburg to Berlin. And Ali was supposed to come from Paris to Berlin, only crossing one border during COVID. It didn't happen, but eventually we were in Paris and we recorded the album in Paris as a duo album. Then Mino came on later on board. So it just happened by chance, circumstances. Confinement by the pandemic.
My last question regarding Kora is, sorry to interrupt you because.
Oh, and Ali also came to a festival when Ablaye couldn't come to my quintet release concert in Salzburg. He couldn't come, so Ali came. But for me, it was important also to continue my Kora exploration. And in some ways, even though I don't play Kora myself, I could say like, I understand how to make it more interesting, expand the Kora and tuning it different octaves differently, and also how to use and integrate other things like flamenco guitar into the project to extend the sounds and know what works, what doesn't work.
Regarding the Kora in general, in my case, I started to listen or love it with Toumani Diabate because with the duo he did with Ali Farka Tour. And I could really hear that the Kora wasn't just a harp, it was more. Toumani played it more like a guitar and a bass combined. So he expanded the sound of the Kora to a modern style instrument. And when I played with Salif Keita, his Kora player, when he started to play the Kora behind his head like Jimi Hendrix and lying on the floor playing the Kora, I said, man, Africa is very ahead. This is my experience with Kora player. And I had a great time with Kora players because usually when you play with, I call them, even if it's roots music, classical musicians, they have a problem with the saxophone and also with my approach because they said, it doesn't fit. I can't play the scales, or the instrument is too loud, or it doesn't fit to the ambience of the composition. But in Africa, I never had it. With the Babamal people to Salif's people, and also with the Yusundur's people, especially percussionists and Kora player, man, they love to play with anybody. And this is something really what I miss here in New York.
The interesting thing is that I just heard a panel talk from Lucy Durand, who actually was also responsible of many of the Tumani Debate recordings. And she brought up this idea and the theory that the word jazz came from jahaz. Jahaz is an Wolof word for mix it up. And that's what African groups do all the time. They just mix it up. They mix blues with Mandé music and Kora, and then they mix this up, and then another musician comes, and so that's just part of this. And it's even in jazz, I think we need to do this much more. But sometimes in certain politics and industries draw these lines because of a shrinking music business or whatever reasons. Maybe because of, I think a big reason is probably also fear and separation, creating that America never truly respected jazz as one of the greatest art forms they contribute to the world ever so far, because that's a type of music which never existed before, and it's a language now which is spoken all over the world. You can go to a jazz club and go to a jam session and play with musicians who are Japanese, African, or Syrian, or it doesn't matter where you go, China, Russia, Brazil, it doesn't matter, and we can play together. So that's a very powerful thing. Normally it takes 1,000 years to create a new language. There's jazz created in a very short time circle of not even 100 years, where the music was spread and spoken all over the world. So that's very impressive.
Speaking of Flamencora in the international music scene, when you go to YouTube and look for Kora, there are so many Kora duos, solos, ensembles. And now talking about music business, when you started in, you said what, 2007?
2007.
That was a different time. It was maybe you and maybe a couple of other.
I don't know.
Now there are so many. What is, in order to sell yourself, your trio, what makes you different from other Kora groups?
I think when we started the duo, we didn't start to realize that the way the Kora works and the duo worked so beautiful, because the Kora has a built-in bass, ostinato very often, and then accompany and voice. So we were really a quartet as a duo.
Okay.
And to realize that took us a while. Then they're really extending the forms. Very often if you play traditional music, it's very repetitive, one pattern. So as soon as you break up the pattern and create longer structures and bring in longer harmonics in that key, not one short pattern, that's extended the duo in some sound ways. Then often I made a tune, like if you're in C harmonic minor, let in tune major the bottom and minor in the top. So you can split up the 3 octaves in different ways so that you have different minor scales. Then the other voice is, even though you don't have the note on the Kora, but you can sing a note which then becomes a harmonic note. Like for instance, Long Tongue, I created the outro melody, and he sings a major 7 over, which is a dominant 3rd chord to the minor. So you can extend it that way. Also, the other idea, I used minimalistic music. Oh yeah, we don't have to forget Philip Glass. Philip Glass was working with Kora players and a lot, doing this with like his minimal music. So I've experimented with that as well, building up tone rows and then improvising over it and having a playback where we improvise over it. So I was really trying also to find ways to put something that we are played by and not played by an idea of what we have to do or have to be. So less is more, or maybe it could be open, whatever. But I think my experience of writing for big band and learning at the BMI Jazz Composer Workshop, and also writing for classical strings, orchestras, informed me as a player to think differently how I approached playing with the Kora. The friend, who's the son of Jerry Wexler, Paul Wexler, mentioned the interesting idea that I actually went the other way around. So I tried to learn and study the music in West Africa and respect them and learn them. Very often the musicians from Africa or West Africa adapt to the jazz musicians. So I was trying to work the other way, or going the other way, the opposite direction, making a film and studying the culture and understanding the mystical and the cultural aspect of Kora.
Good.
So it was more like an all-around, a holistic search for music, not just music, but okay, why do you play the Kora? What is the story? And the story is that his ancestor, 43rd generation, went on this journey to search how to help and heal his neighbors and help reduce suffering in the world, and eventually comes to this genius who tells him to build this, and then he basically plays the first song that everybody learns is Alalaiki. So every time he plays the instrument, he has to be in peace with himself so that he can spread the peace to the world. So this transmission is even very important today for Ablaye and Ali. We're on a mission to make music to heal others.
Maybe this is now a good time to play another song. You chose
Ladje.
Ladje. Okay, let's listen. Yeah, shall
Sure.
we listen?
Yes.
I like this song a lot because in this song I really hear the trumpet more in a jazzy situation, minimal jazzy situation, the Kora sounding like Mandé music, and the flamenco guitar really flamenco. I could hear the three styles. Am I correct?
Yeah, and then that's the reason, one reason why we chose it as the first song on the CD, is really introduces. We start as a duo with a ballad introduction, and then solo feature for the guitar, and mixing the two overtones, which are really beautiful, enriching each other and playing off each other. The song is about the mirror in the way of what we planned we will receive. So if we act a certain way in life, we will become that. So the seed we set early on in our childhoods or in life, or even later in life, it takes time for them to come out. But if we choose to, hopefully we choose make good choices and set good seeds, and then that will lead to a good life and a fulfilled life and peace, hopefully.
Good. Do you think that Flamencora could become a quartet with a drum?
Sometimes I could see that happening for certain moments. I would love to, if you had the funding, for instance, to create maybe a show with dancers and have them clap the palmers and have rhythm that way. In the duo session, I always love the freedom of the less people you have on stage, the more freedom you have to go in different directions, determine where we go. You can't do this with an orchestra. That you start by saying, see, that's what happens, how long we play this part, and then when we go this part, it would be very difficult to direct. You would have to conduct or have to music pre-notated. And so the beauty is that we can play with the time. You can slow down, you can speed up, you can stop, start, stop. In the trio, I could see it's already much, much harder to control or go in different directions, because it's already, you have to communicate with others, and then the people have different interests. One has an idea, the other has an idea. Then there's the language barriers, and I have to speak, of course, native German, English, and French, and so we always have to communicate. And then it's important in this project, like how you speak to others, because the cultural understanding of how people receive what you're saying. Sometimes the directness of New York German is very direct, whereas someone in Senegal, it feels like attacked, and it's all.
Yeah, I know.
I just wanted to. I want to change this one chord, or the inversion. I want a different inversion on this chord, but then it's, oh, you don't like my bridge. So all these things happen in this project. But usually it's a lot of fun. And even with all the difficulties and distances, when we come together, we're really together, and we have time and love spend time together. And that's really beautiful and unique. And it's a very different way of working than, for instance, in New York, where you call someone up and you have rehearsals, time clocked, you leave and go on, and then have next. And this is really... I really prefer that way of working. It's more about friendship and really learning from each other and being open and spending time together. Even though in Ablaye, at the same time, there are people who are really spiritual and they're focused of not being themselves and staying home at the same time, but you can still explore the life and with the other players and spend time together, but we still can eat together, breakfast and all these things together. So it's really beautiful. And then I come to New York, I stay in my place. I'm here in a residency called Deconfining, and how a fair exchange between Western and African artists can happen. So that's why we're currently here with Flamencora in Madrid, recording our next album and doing music videos. I'm trying to open doors, and our show was sold out within 20 minutes here in Madrid. I've been doing this now for 14 years, and I have the same obstacles with the duo that I have now in Flamencora, plus Ukraine war and Putin, which cuts all the cultural funding here in Europe. So my way, even though I'm always based in New York, my idea was I'm going to enter the music business higher. I can book better concerts in Europe, higher pay, and that's how I survive, instead of trying to do the Manhattan hassle, bad pays gig or no money or things. I was trying to enter it on a high level, and it worked really well for the duo. And we, after 5 years booking it myself, we got an agency and we got really busy. I was making middle-class income, but that today seems very difficult. It's 3 people now, and some more travel costs, and the cultural funding here is sometimes slashed 80 to 50% in different institutions for festivals, and it's very sad what's happening. And it's felt, I think, across all the board for all disciplines of art, music, and performance.
Okay, let's talk about the business side at the end, because but it's good that you mentioned that. So you know what, let's talk now to round up the Flamencora subject.
We're very pleased to bring Flamencora for the first time to New York with Roberto, and we are opening on May 28th at the Dome. And it's also where we actually did our New York premiere with the duo with Ablaye. So it's the same space, and I'm very grateful that Mehmet made it available and support us in that way, and are really supportive. And then we also have, thanks to you and Musicians for Musicians, the connection to Kingston chapter, Stephen Johnson, and possible that we play at the Tempo Arts Performing Space, which is a gorgeous renovated church. I've been only outside, but I saw the images inside and heard it's like for electronic music surround installations. You can change the reverb, so I'm really looking forward to perform that. So Dome is May 28th and Kingston is May 30th.
Then you said you would have also workshop afterwards, somewhere, workshop?
We're doing an art performance. I'm going to do a 20 minutes performance with Johanna Roa at the Emily Harvey Foundation. And she wrote a poem for Johanna Ines de la Cruz. She is a nun who lived in Mexico, and as a woman was not allowed to be an intellectual. So she wanted to be an intellectual and write and compose music, and society didn't allow her to be that. And that's why she became a nun. And there's a lot of music using her poems, but we found one song she composed, so we do the little intro, and then Cristina Soleil, a very prominent flamenco singer, took a traditional sieta melody and put her poem to that setting, and we accompany her as flamenco. And in the Sigiriya moment, the piece, I think we are always enriched if you think a little bit out of the box. Sometimes we have to force ourselves, or luckily it came from outside. Like I've never thought about that person and her confinement as a woman, not being allowed to be an intellectual. And it's a funny poem. She asks in the poem, what it would have been if Aristotle would have to cook the meals for himself? What change of history would we have? And it's a really beautiful story of a woman freeing her mind, really, and deconfining herself and being able to do what she has to do, because that's who she is and that's what she has to do.
Okay, then let's go to another aspect of your career. You're also a filmmaker. And you mentioned before you did a documentary in 2012 called Griot.
Yes.
And I watched it. It was very nice. I really liked it. It reminded me a little when I was in Bamako meeting Salif Keita and went to his village, and so I could relate to it. Also, the color of the movie is so typical. It was really African color. I felt a little nostalgic. You did another movie called Displaced. When I saw that movie, I found, man, Volker is not just a musician, he's also somebody who cares for his community. And you documented homeless people in Staten Island, right? So these two movies feature you not just a musician, but therefore I want to call you also a music activist. When the music becomes like what you do, more political, social, cultural, impacted performances, then I really get interested in somebody's music, in your case especially, because I can learn things from your film, from your music. I'm also surprised about things I don't know, right? When you did these two movies, you have done many more movies, by the way. How do you feel as a filmmaker?
I slipped into the role. It was the discovery of the griot culture. I had no idea growing up in Germany that there was no written language in West Africa, and that's how improvisation is so critical part in the living history, which is changed by depending on who's the audience or what is important at the moment and how it functions, and the relationship between black culture. So I wanted to share this discovery, but also wanted to share something about Africa which is positive. We always have these films about these terrible things, war or like things in Africa which happen all the time because it's a country with the most resources. And I wanted to film to make not about the negative things, but about, look what we have here. There's such a rich culture and music and a vibrancy, and I wanted to share that with the world. That's why I made it. It's my first film, was a music documentary, it was a feature film, which was crazy to do a feature film right from the start. I had to learn.
You mean Griot, right?
So it took me 5 years to make. Eventually, After many applications and learning how to write grants, I learned that process doing the filmmaking. I learned about music grants, which helped me in that way too, to get to access current funding for my music projects. And eventually bring like Sam Pollard, who edited most of Spike Lee's documentaries. And then when I started documentary filmmaking, his name was mentioned. I loved Spike Lee's movies, so there was always, I thought, African American, they must be interested in this film. And he came on board. It was wonderful. Leslie Mulkey was the scriptwriter. He took over the research part of the project. We applied many times to National Endowment for the Humanities, but then we heard we have to play 4 times, but we already played 2 times. I don't have the time, the finances to wait 2 more years. I already spent 4 or 5 years on this project. And so we decided to do our own film and got started. And Victor Kunasik who's the editor of the film, who taught me editing with this film. And he has trained many of the great local New York-based creative editors, because there's editors who can create by a script, and there's editors who are creative and can create a story with the material they see and have, which takes a lot of time. So an abstract film like Griot is something which takes 6 to 8 months to edit, because that's just what it takes. So we have 110 hours of footage. I probably saw it 5 times, the 6 times, which is 600 hours, and you can calculate it's probably, I don't know, half a year of just watching the same thing over and over again and transcribing. And my French was not that good at that time. I get much better thanks to the filmmaking and touring so much in France. And I worked 14 hours a day to make this film with Victor. He taught me how to edit, and then I gave me homework. Next day he came back, I did everything he told me, and I learned how to select, how to assembly, how to edit scenes. And still, I'm not such a great, to be honest, storyteller as a filmmaker. So I'm mainly a musician. I'm also...
The images you used in this were great. The way you choose the images, the color and the music.
But it's also
it was great to see Randy Weston, because I know Randy Weston very well.
Yeah.
So for me, I liked it. And actually, our audience can watch all these documentaries on your website, right?
Yes, the website. Also in the United States, you
YouTube,
can...
No,
yes, the Griot film is available on Prime.
Oh, Prime, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
But the Homeless movie is available online for free, yes, because the prime purpose is to share it with as many people as possible.
Maybe we can give a code to our members.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you can send out the link in one email, it's no problem.
So we know you are a musician, you're a filmmaker, you're of course a composer. Let's talk about some of your teachers. One really was striking was Markus Stockhausen, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's son. He was your trumpet player at the Hochschule für Musik Köln. What did he teach you? What did you learn from him?
The important thing is it was really a master-student relationship. And even though he was offered the professorship position twice, he rejected it because he couldn't fit into this conservatory teaching model. Basically, what we do in the beginning, when I was really needed a lot of help in trumpet playing, the way it worked, we did yoga together, we warmed up together, then we had a little coffee breakfast, then I could listen to him practicing his music. He was preparing for concerts, and then he would practice with me and we have lunch together. So it was really a holistic relationship. The only thing what I didn't have to do was do the errands or run errands or clean his bathroom or anything like this, because it was a still from the paid position from the Hochschule, but it's something I think we all should learn music in that way. I think music's communal thing, and we need this concept of teaching it. And this is 1 hour, and you have this lesson, and you go home, and it can be helpful for certain things, technical things, but in terms of really.
How does he like Flamencora?
Oh, I've never asked him, but he loves my music. It's like we stay in contact.
I ask my questions. Maybe I'm closer to death than you, but I like to know, especially people who were close to me. So I asked even Ornette what he thinks about my saxophone and so on. Actually, when he told me listening to my saxophone, to my music, he was like a mirror. So if you don't ask your maestro...
It was a closer relationship to that aspect. And interesting enough, maybe the sound engineer would have done it anyway, but I had the Kora and the guitar mixed at the center stereo, but basically by separating right and left, you can clearer to distinguish who's playing what, because they're very similar in sound, but yet very different in overtone structure. Yeah, he loved it. He's very encouraged. And I think that we now, the second album, especially the residency here at the Goethe Institute in Madrid, really helped us to really create a new kind of group sound, because the music we're doing is neither of all of the things. It's neither jazz, it's neither flamenco, it's neither Mandé music, or it's really our own music with our own text and messages. Mostly originals. We do sometimes we do traditionals, but we add then some kind of new section to it, which then makes it a little bit unique or stretches the tradition. But mostly it's original music. Even in the duo, I think it was very important that I already wrote a classical piece and a big band album record and a quintet record, even though it came out later. But I had that experience before I worked with the duo, and I think as a player I was thinking more as like colors and blending than if I would have been just a trumpet player. So I was thinking about, I painted when I was young, so I was thinking like, oh, this is like an impressionistic painting, so I just played colors, adding to what a bath of music. We did the tone roll music with the Kora, that's called.
But when I listened to Markus Stockhausen, I could hear your trumpet in his playing, or the other way.
He has a big influence of me,
So
yes. One thing is for me important is authenticity, and I felt when I studied with Bata, was someone who lived 15 years in Bata, came back to Germany. I felt when I started with him, this is authentic. When I worked with a Brazilian band, it was a Brazilian rhythm section. It felt authentic. And Markus is authentic too, because he's such a serious classical musician. He got offered the odd job as a Berlin Philharmonic when he was 25, turning it down because it was too confined for him. And being such a great improviser and playing jazz and playing with the oud player from Tunisia, quarter-tone, flugelhorn, back even in the 80s. So it's huge influence.
Who I really like to hear a little more is about Enrique Vargas.
Enrique Vargas. It's an interesting character. He's changed his name a couple of times, but the reason he's like a little genius teacher.
A flamenco teacher in Madrid and was
yes, but he was also in New York, and he's changed his name. He has a Russian name. He grew up in Russia. He was one of the Spanish families who was put in Russia to the States, studying jazz with Les Paul for 10 years, and I was also a friend with Miles Davis, and then moved back to Spain and became close friends with Paco Lucia and Tomatito and Vicente. And he's really here in Madrid a specialist for Paco Lucia. He transcribed for the Paco Lucia Foundation, I think, as well. And people
was he his teacher as well?
Yeah, he got his PhD in musicology when he was 17, and he uses the Indian talas for flamenco rhythms, and then you speak out the kind of call to learn the rhythm or resolve on the 10th beat in flamenco or other things. So that's, I think, a genius approach, which I think people have not used yet, to create talas.
So what did you learn from him especially?
I redefined my rhythm through Konakol using the Indian system. The problem is if you want to learn complex rhythms, they're mostly oral. In South Spain, Africa, Brazil, jazz in the States. And the only culture who has a written system developed to speak polyrhythm, feel polyrhythm in your body is the Indians in India. They have done it for many thousands of years, and it's a very simple way to do 4/3 to this. So like you can easily figure 4 against 3 with the metronome. I think every musician should learn this because it's so high of value, because you really feel your feet and your body experience one rhythm and then you express another polyrhythm against it. Something so basic, which seems to be more present in older generation of jazz. Sometimes I see great players who can play jazz, but then they never deal with polyrhythms. One thing I want to say, the good thing about the teacher, Enrique Vargas, because he has an academic approach as well. So he knows the street and the academic, and that makes it very fast. For me, being older and not living in Spain, only passing as much as I can, it's so important and helps me to really understand it and grasp it much faster. So then when in a situation I realize I'm doing the resolution now automatically on the 10th beat because I've practiced it many times, or I don't lose the foot in Cigaria because I've practiced it many times. So I'm really grateful for that. It could have been taking me years to learn that the fast. So it speeds up things for me as being older.
The last big thing I wanted to talk with you is about you as a musician. It seems like you always have been a leader more than a sideman, right? So for being a leader...
In the States, yes.
Yeah.
It's not appearing in my things, but I probably did 50 records before in Germany. I was playing with Steve Lacy on a record, and a big band record where I also play some solos on. There's this couple of things I did before, but it's doesn't appear, but I did, arrange for Brazilian bands that I mentioned before earlier.
Okay, so my question is now, how do you make your income with making music? How do you live from music at this time, 2026? Can you make enough money to live from music, especially when you live in New York?
The income comes in, it's coming from streaming. We had this very successful records from a duo, which is very helpful. Then secondly, it's grants for projects, for recording a concert in a local museum or that of sorts. And then it's performing locally and also performing abroad in Europe. My obstacles as I'm doing these projects, or some of the projects, people live far apart. So we have very high travel costs and visa obstacles. And so the majority of the money I make goes back into the projects. So even if you get a grant, the majority goes to, now these days, for instance, the new upcoming project with Santo and Mino Sinalo trio, half of the money goes just to print CDs, pay for publicity, mix and mastering, and advertising. So because the companies now, they want you to come with a full package, everything ready, from music videos to
license.
They can't take the risk anymore because the money is not coming back from streaming as it used to be. Like back in 10 years back, early we sold 10,000 CDs in 6 months in France. That was real money coming back to the distributor, kept people alive working in the stores and etc. and going and eventually arriving at the label. And since we share the profits as I'm producing it, then that's the way it worked. But now the money much less, but still yet, because we had this successful records, there's a decent amount of money coming back. Not much, but it's basically like a regular grant money you get. But it's, most of them goes back into paying publicity for the next album or whatever. So
my question is now very direct, because I'm suffering this question, and all MFM members and all musicians. To have a decent life in New York, paying your rent, good education for your kid, you must make annually $125,000.
Yes, I agree to that, but I don't make that.
Okay,
So
how do you balance? How do you get the balance in order to stay in New York, to get Flamencora to New York, do the releases, do whatever you do?
So first of all, my wife's parents are nearby. So when I travel for many weeks, there are grandparents who support me in that way, that they can help taking care of our child. My wife is a deputy director of a nonprofit, so she's making good income. We were lucky to buy a co-op, which was cheaper than renting in Brooklyn on Staten Island, right by the ferry, with beautiful water views. So there's a couple of lucky decisions we made along the way, which allows us to live in a very simple but good way. I have healthcare because my wife works full time. So those are the reasons. And I was able to make the down payment and the renovation of the apartment because I was doing really well back in 20 years ago or something. So that has changed. So, and this has changed for many people, especially after the pandemic. Very few got pushed up to the high top and are doing really well. There's very famous musicians who are not getting enough work, who used to have a lot of touring work. So it's a combination. So
how do you look into the future for yourself? What needs to be done? What do you think must change?
I think we have this part of the CMA grant I just got for the release because I released a lot of collaborative works with Guy Klosevic and the trio. And now this is a work which, my last jazz record, really where I composed all the music, was 2017, I think. And I did big band, quintet, everything. So now this trio with Chano Dominguez and Mino features mostly my music, and with flamenco jazz compositions and other compositions outside the flamenco realm. I hope that will establish me in the jazz world, because they can't put me now, oh, this is the world music trumpeter, or he just does that. And that it helps me to establish as a serious jazz artist, now working with the top in the field. Also, the future for me is also to try to create this authentic project locally in New York as well. So maybe I can come up with a project where I find authentic musicians, because one thing of Flamencora, the duo, was so unique or makes it so unique because we have a Brazilian flamenco player. Where can I find a Brazilian flamenco player who brings the African Brazilian experience to flamenco and has this rhythmic knowledge and can put it into a project? New York is a melting pot. You have all these musicians, but the question of authenticity, where you can actually live to be a real flamenco player, is the question.
For me,
what I wanted to say is part of this CMA grant was an acceleration program, and there was a very interesting aspect of sustainability. And the question is like, how can you do it again without any support or funding? So that's the questions you have to ask.
Exactly.
So my hope is in the future that I have been also in the past a little bit unlucky that every time I started a project with a local quartet or quintet, that the musician all of a sudden started to play with Vijay Iyer or other Chicoria and then moved to other outside of town or to Berlin. You know, now the Senegalese percussionist lives in Los Angeles, the bass player has moved to Brazil. So it's every time I try to be, or that's why I also search for the local project, the Homeless Project, or the other project, a VR project about the unique place of death, about the mass grave in New York City, was trying to build projects which are locally based, you know, and because I didn't grow up here, I don't have my family, I have to build the family. And I built it with Mino, and I'm looking forward to build it with more serious musicians.
You are now a member of MFM, right?
Yes.
So what does it tell you about?
Community is very important. And I can't thank you enough, Sohrab, for making so many things possible. We have the concert at Tempo in Kingston now, thanks to you. You already invited me to your projects. I met other great musicians, and Stephen Johnson invited me to play in his group, this bossa group up in Kingston, and was like, hey, I would love to hear your sound there. So it's really about community, and MFM really helps me to do that, you know, and be more connected. And if I need help or advice, I can always come there, and that's great. Or the opportunity to share the stage, even for a short moment, with Arturo Ferro or Joe Levana was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's building these connections. So
actually, you don't have to thank, because this is what MFM is about. That it's not a very big organization of hundreds of members. It's under 100, but we like to help each other, act collectively. Also try to be what I call musicians with attitudes, which is demanding fair pay, that you as a leader also pay fairly to your sidemen. And now with AI, I don't know how you feel about the AI technology. Are you worried about AI taking away your work, your opportunity to play?
I think it will take away certain kinds of...
And generative AI especially.
Yes. I think some people will probably figure out how to use it as a tool. I think if you're a film composer or a songwriter, have to come up with a lot of songs at the same time, you can use it to spit out music. But I think what AI will never achieve is the human aspect of suffering, of love and trauma and overcoming trauma and all these healing aspects, or the choices I make. As it can sound of something that has been there before, but it cannot make the emotional choices and choices of notes I can make in a project like my Flamencora. When I play a note and it creates something, a special mood or something. I never heard it before from AI, never, not once. But if the music is really deeply and magical, one note of Miles Davis or Billie Holiday, it just blows you away. And that power is something which only is created because of the human experience. The music of jazz, especially in the earlier days, is so vibrant, so strong because of their need to overcome all the suffering, to have something which can...
Volker, but this is not the problem. The problem is that music can be stolen, copyright infringement, right?
Yeah.
So if some Miles does that sound, you can pick up that sound and make it to your own and say it's mine. So that's the problem with AI, that you can steal copyright ownership so easily through a technology. And this is something we have to fight as a group of people. And this can be done by you as one person, right? So the point is that even, I don't know how much you talk with your band members, like with Ali and Alejandro, about the business side, about copyright ownership, and whether they're registered to a PRO, all these things. This must be all happen in a musician's life in order to protect oneself against any kind of exploitation.
Yeah.
This is something I personally worry most.
Yeah.
As far as AI is regulated, maybe that's the only way. But in America, how do you want to regulate something when you have 52 states? who are also independent countries, right? Actually, the last thing is what I'm trying to do is also to get some German musicians who live and play and perform here in New York. And it's a little tough even to have a German musicians community in New York because either they're so busy or they don't care. How do you feel about the German musicians community here in New York?
Most people come here and then leave. I was fortunate to work with Peter Kowald, some in Wuppertal, who was also based in New York, and he passed away at the same time I came to New York, and we were supposed to meet on a Sunday, and he passed away on a Saturday. So I was disconnected to the free improv scene that way, and was put into a conservatory setting. I had to tell you, at that time, people followed me around with the fellowship to come to New York and started here, but they all went back to Berlin or Cologne. And recently met, thanks to MFM, some people like Peter Knoll, other people. I knew Thomas Heberer back from, but we never played together. So I don't know too many Germans, actually.
No, as you said, Peter Knoll, then Welf Dohr, Thomas Heberer, Hans Tammen.
Yeah, Hans Tammen, yes.
Ingrid Laubrock.
Yeah.
Joe Hertenstein, Timo Vollbrecht, and
But
Gregor Hüb.
Yeah. But Joe went back to Berlin, I think. He's now in Berlin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Volker, do me a favor as an MFM member. Get more members for our German members. I wish you good luck. Your Flamencora plays at Drome on the 28th and at Tempo in Kingston on the 30th, right?
30th, yes.
I will be there, of course. And everybody who wants to know more about, in the description, you will find his website. And now speaking about making some promotion for MFM, MFM Speaks Out podcast is available on all major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. We have two versions, which is one is with image and the other one is audio. So please like our podcast and share it with your friends. And now, let's end, Volker, with the last track. We decided it's called Tour Maranke. Volker, thank you very much. We are professionals and are essential workers, as important as doctors or therapists or dentists.
If you think about what's going on in the world, we cut cultural funding because of the wars, but what we actually need is culture at these moments. Where our societies break apart and we have these wars, we actually need culture to calm our minds, to be peaceful and create peace. So instead of actually investing in culture, we're investing in tanks, in missiles. And what we actually need is culture to turn it around, because the direction we are going with the algorithms and driving us further and further apart is so dangerous and it's illogical.
And we musicians are part of the culture and should.
So what we do is important. No matter how hard and difficult it is, we need to continue doing what we're doing because it's very important.
Okay, Volker. Wish you good luck as a musician.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
As a music activist, please continue the good work you have done.
Thank you.
Love you. Bye-bye.